We're back out here once again, and today we're doing a deep dive into what might be one of my all-time favorite winter fish catching tools. That's right, today we're doing a deep dive into these little guys, jigs. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. Oh, I got him. Oh, come on, you. Oh, that feels pretty good. Stay down. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and I would just like to say Merry Christmas to everyone out there as you'll be watching this video on Christmas Day. A great day for sure. 2023 sure streamed by really fast. And hopefully all of you are surrounded by loved ones, family, and friends enjoying this holiday. As for me, well, I got to spend it my favorite way possible. That is out on the lake. Now, it's gloomy, it's rainy, but I would not change that for the world. I got to go fishing today, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. And on a day like today, what am I doing? Well, it's what I'm doing a lot of days, and that's fishing a jig. In the wintertime, in the summertime, it does not matter. A jig is such a versatile tool. Now, I know I talk about jigs all the time, and for a lot of anglers out there, they just have not made that connection. They've not made the connection between, well, these and catching not only numbers of fish, but those big girls. It seems like only yesterday that the wife and I were at the Trophy Bass Lake, and we were catching 5 and 6 pound bass on jigs like crazy. And that success translated all year long, all the way through the summer, all the way through the fall. I'm always talking about jigs because jigs work. Okay, if you have trouble fishing a jig, if you've not gotten a bite fishing a jig, if fishing a jig has never been something that you've had confidence in, watch this video. I'm telling you, we can turn that around. You will find confidence in a jig. A lot of times they'll say, hey, just lock that jig rod in your hand and go with it until you start catching fish. And a lot of times that really works. But on the other side of the coin, we can do things. We can have some little small tricks, little tips that will encourage you to catch those fish faster. Now, when it comes to jig fishing, well, we're still talking about those same 3 zones that we've been talking about. Zone 1, out deep, Zone 2, intermediate, and Zone 3, up shallow. And that's the great thing about a jig is they are effective in all 3 zones. You essentially have the same level of effectiveness in all 3 zones. That's why jigs work so well, and that's why anglers are so committed to jigs. Let's take a look at some out deep jigs, right? Like this right here. This is for my deep, out in the middle of the lake, my Zone 1 fishing, right? This is a 3/4 ounce football jig, and I've got just a regular style chunk trailer. This is what I'm going to be fishing this year. I've got a more compact design. I've got that chunk, I've got it threaded on there. A lot of times you can just loop it and let it hang, but I've got it threaded all the way up right there. I've got this on 20-pound fluorocarbon, and I'm fishing this in the deepest parts of my lake. I'm fishing this in that 25, 35-foot area in that Zone 1 that we talked about. And this is an amazing tool for when those fish go off deep, whenever it gets cold and they found their winter homes offshore. And they've got their bellies in the mud, and they just don't want to move. Well, I can drag this. I can cast it out there, and I can let it fall, and I can let it fall, and I can let it fall. And then when it hits the bottom, when that reel stops spinning and I see that it's hit the bottom, I can just give it a little bit of nudge and then just let it wait. And then just give it a little bit of a nudge and then just let it wait. And it does not take that long. If I'm in the area and I know there's fish in that area, which most times there are, if I'm fishing that area, I know that there's going to be bass there. it won't take long before I can get them to react to this, and I can get some pretty aggressive strikes. That's what I love about this. Even though they say that jigs aren't necessarily a numbers game, they can be in the wintertime. They say that you're going to get fewer bites, but bigger bites. Well, in the winter, you're generally going to be getting fewer bites anyway, regardless of the techniques that you're using. But the jig game is generally about the same. It's usually fairly consistent all year long, especially when you're fishing deep. And that's not something you need fancy electronics for. I'm using this on my little plastic boat. I've got no electronics on that boat. And what I'm doing is I'm fan casting. I know the layout of the lake. I know what's beneath me because I've been out there a lot, but I also study my maps. I'm studying avionics. I'm studying Active Captain. I'm studying Google Earth, right? And I cast that jig out there. I let it fall, and then I slowly drag it to me. If I'm fishing something a little bit more shallow in that intermediate range, that's when I'm switching to, this is my dedicated jig rod. And it's dedicated jig rod because I fish this in the gnarly, nasty hydrilla. I'm fishing this right along those hydrilla edges, right along those weed lines. I'm bringing this through that underwater cover. I'm bringing it through that underwater structure, those brush piles. And I'm getting dirty with this, which is why I have 50-pound braid to a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. This is a 7.5 to 1 gear ratio reel, which is a little bit faster than I might normally have for a cranking rod, but I'll even go up to something like an 8.1. I want a little bit faster so I can catch up to those fish, because a lot of times they'll hit it and they'll run away or they'll run toward me, and I need to be able to reel in that slack really quick and set that hook. And again, I'm not doing anything fancy with this. I've got just a regular chunk style trailer on here. In the wintertime, this is what you want. You don't want something that's got a lot of flap. You're not going to use a crawl. You're not going to use a creature. You're not going to use something along those lines. You're going to use something that's just basically a chunk style trailer, because that's what those bass are after. Like we've said a million times, you've got to match the attitude. You've got to match the output, the energy level of those bass. And something like this is going to do that. So in the intermediate area, in that 10, 15 foot area, on my lakes, that may go down to 20 or 25 foot in your lakes, depending on how much vegetation, how much cover, what's down there. I'm going to be throwing something like this. This is actually just a little bit heavier duty than what I'm throwing in the deeper area. But again, I'm also running into a lot more gunk. I'm running into a lot more junk. Now, when it comes to fishing closer to the bank, you guys have seen me fish many things. I'll fish a spinning combo if I'm fishing something like a wacky jig, right? Something like this has worked exceptionally well for me on a spinning combo. 10-pound braid, 8 to 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. It works great. You don't have to work this on a bait caster. You don't have to work any of them on a bait caster if you don't want to. I prefer to use a bait caster, but if you've got a heavier duty spinning, you've got a 300 or 400 size spinning reel, and you want to put a little bit more, heavier line on it, heavier fluorocarbon line or braided line, you're absolutely fine to do that. Me, I prefer to use a bait cast, especially when I'm fishing up deep. But for a lighter jig, something like this 1/4 ounce or even down to a 3/16 ounce, and I'm fishing along pondweed, I'm fishing along, milfoil or along those lines, especially in the wintertime. Again, we're casting this right up in there, and we're not giving it a whole lot of action. We're going to let it sit. We're going to let those skirts flare out as they're going to do under the water. That'll flare out, and that current will move it around, and it'll make it ebb and flow. And all you've got to do is just, give it a little movement, give a little bit of subtle movement once in a while. You don't have to get crazy about it. And another thing that I like to do, especially on a day like today, well, I'm going to be using a rattling jig. And this is a Strike King, what they call a pro model jig. I don't know why they call it a pro model, but it's just a rattling jig. And I have got a Rage Menace grub and a glacier or ice color on the back of it. And this thing stands out really nicely on a day like today. It really stands out under the water. Plus, that little bit of rattle, and I'm not going crazy with it. I'm not going crazy with it at all. I'm doing just a little twitch here and a little twitch there. The key is to be slow, right? We're dragging it along nice and slow, maybe giving it a couple of little twitches, dragging it in nice and slow, maybe giving it a little couple twitches, reeling in the slack. And you're always going to be very gentle with it. You don't want to overpower that rod. You don't want to overpower that bait. You want to be very calm, very smooth with it. Because right now, anything can turn those bass off. It's going to set them off. So whether you're fishing from the bank, whether you're fishing way out deep, the motion is pretty much going to be the same. So there you have it. Winter jig fishing, one of my absolute favorite ways to go about it. Whether you're fishing out deep, whether you're fishing up shallow, it does not matter. It can be a great technique and presentation for getting those slow, lethargic bass to commit to your lures. And you can really catch not only a few nice ones, but you can start catching plenty of numbers as well. And that will help you build your confidence as spring and summer roll around and you can really get into jig fishing. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.